My name is Brett. I'm going to be reading tonight, and basically what I had planned on, what I planned on doing was I was going to write something, especially for this, and try to self-publish it, like give it to you guys here. But unfortunately, I teach and I was really busy. But I'm going to read a part of it, and then so I think I'm going to try to self-publish this in the future. So if you guys like it, this will be probably something I'm going to try to turn into a full work. But this is called Vessel. And this is something that I guess just by reading just stuff lately, especially Blake Butler's book, and just his stuff, I guess this kind of did something to me, and I guess I kind of wrote what I was feeling after reading that. So basically, this takes place on this fjord in Scandinavia, and the two main characters are Erland and Keelfred. And so I'm going to read a sequence and then a part afterward. So hopefully you guys enjoy this. So this is part 2. It's called Vessel at Midnight, a Prelude. And Keelfred opens her hands, and within lies the shadowless night. And Keelfred opens her mouth, but there are wooden beams for teeth, and nails for gums, and coats of sheep as multi-layered tongues. And Keelfred closes her eyes, and closes her eyes, and closes her eyes, and watches vessels within vessels, transfigure dust into musty, darkened spaces, within spacelessness under floorboards. And Keelfred opens her eyes, and her body's not her body, but that of Erland's. And her body is wedged between floorboards, and Erland stands by the window. And Keelfred opens her mouth, but oars as dull molars chatter in undeterminable tracing patterns. And Erland watches Keelfred, and Erland adjusts her left shoulder. But within space, which is not much space, Erland hears 8 songs arranged as trapezoids of oblique heaviness. And Keelfred watches, and Erland opens the frame around the window, and she flickers momentarily, and walks over towards the alcove where contained fire burns. And Keelfred watches Erland pry her axe from the mantle, and begin forming a vessel from her body. And Keelfred watches astonished as his body becomes less of a body and more of a replica of his vessel moored in the bay. Part 5, Vessel at Midnight, a continuation. And Erland and 3, seated in vessel quadrupled in narrow light of a single ocular point, held slightly ruined in an untitled roof of floorboards taped together in double formation, held with feeble tape and runny glue. And Erland holds oars which are ovarian glands and beings to row out towards center. That is within an outer center that contains a destination. And Keelfred is seated in another vessel, taped to Erland's, that drags behind his as he rows. And Keelfred's vessel secretes mucus from earlobes that eye the outer hole which lubricate her joints of her vessel, which are braided hamstrings within finely selected gum tissue. And from her vantage point of light that is gooey and foreign, impregnates a barren darkness, which creeps on its hands and pelvis turned upward that is hard. And Keelfred swallows with trachea attached underfoot. And Keelfred has a collection of nails which are thoughts that act as single isolated words which she carries nestled to her chest in a bird nest. And Keelfred wishes to toss the nest into Erland's vessel, but the twigs continually come undone, and nails of varying hues and lengths, destinies refract lightly against the bottom of her vessel, and are lost among the pubic hair line the base of her vessel. And Erland glances back towards Keelfred, and notices her eyes and mouth are vaginal cavities, and an eye rests upon one peak of one vaginal cavity. Another eye is sewn inside a musty armpit, and her mouth has been crudely taped to the sail, which is slowly losing its adhesion, and is turned laterally from its base, and secretes molten lava, as if from the shops of the blacksmiths, now seen entering the picture, in sculpted chest cavities that have been proofed within water repellent, and decorated with collarbones from internalized rhythms. An observation. Vessel at Midnight continued. And Keelfred begins counting fingernails kept in her bird nest, and she imagines she is another mother bird who is taking care of her young, and she slowly, carefully, lovingly places more nails into the nest, and looks out toward the center of the fjord. And Keelfred feels herself becoming undone, and this is all too much, and as tape joints begin sagging from sockets, her glued frame begins losing its shape, and Erland can be seen rowing his vessel ever closer to the center of the fjord. And Keelfred realizes the moon is sharp, and a great sadness fills her diaphragm. And by the light of the projector's flickering nebula pattern reflected over the desolate topography of a continuous blackness, settling over the fjord, Keelfred breaks the scaling angles of her mind with her most prized fingernails. And the half-life of this vessel, a flotation above body, levitated above body, is dusk over forest seen from below, is equivalent to the thought that I'm out somewhere apart from myself and I'm investigating the seabed, and on calm evenings I row out to you. This heaviness, the night, is ours. Yours and ours. And as Keelfred raises her head and watches Erland rowing with oars that are tusks of pine shaped as colonies of trails as paint-dripping quasars at night, and Erland's become a triplicate and his body flickers gently, And it is through though Keelford can see through him, if only momentarily. And Keelford looks down at her hands and remembers when he pulled her aside by the window, when these iron-fastened nights were fewer, and said, I want to be there with you now, and a year from now, and a year from now into infinity. And Keelford remembers sleep patterns of dream sequences filled with forest families and tendered angles. Endless darkness, says Keelford. Almost probably, says Keelford as Erland. Why has it become so quiet, says Keelford. Take my hand, says Keelford as Erland. Listen, says Keelford. The sounds moonlight cratering against pines, and says Keelford as Erland. Keelford says, soon we will row out to each other and make quiet introductions with lips of heavy water that will hold the way under the moonlight of Indian summer. Yes, says Keelford. Soon I must leave, says Keelford as Erland. But... And as Keelford begins walking, Keelford stands and Erland continues walking, and Keelford hides her face from view, and Erland keeps walking, and keeps walking, and keeps walking, and keeps walking, and keeps walking. And Keelford lifts her head, and Erland is resting his oars and looking back at Keelford, but she is unable to speak and only understands language and fingernails, muscle cavities, airways, and mucus secretions. And the water is still, and the far wall of the horizon flutters, and a dim glow appears towards one extreme of the horizon, and tape floorboards and nails, hastily hammered, glued sheets, and darkness-tacked orbs of cotton as crescent moon begin crumbling. And Keelford opens her mouth again to shout, but her beloved and her vessel begins closing around her, and her folds and cavities ache in the darkness of her vessel. So this is part 3, Vessel at Midnight, a continuation. An orb, an egg, a circular something, an enclosure, a waking nothing, an eraser, an erasure, a moon, a drowned shadow, raised, a somebody, a nobody, a time, a period of timelessness, a mountain, the mountain, sunken into abyssal depths, a fjord, a vessel, a two, a pair of 3, a trestle of 4, and 3 to part into 2, reduced into 1 that is now entrails with loss, a single iteration, a lonely space, an epigraph is a curtain, as what was sunken under heavy water, under heavy-weighted sky, the undersize of waves supported vessels of dragging solitude, under ceilings of worn floorboards between thoughts and spaces within memory. A memory is the great sarcophagus of Grandfather C. A procession of the iron works of heavy-hearted night, a staggering helms operating in secret machinations under the dim glow of the projector's light, displaying a lone vessel, moored in the inlet against an invisible lateral display, a finite distance from the vessel where trails of soft linguistical inflections can be heard, arising above the waves that swoop the cross of the wind. Resurrection is tremendous, endless. Okay, this is the last section I'm going to read.
Which number is it?
What?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This is section 8. Intervals, calignous shadows, continuous gloom says. You and I says. You says. Where says. A beat, a pause. Vessel of static, where I thought you were, says. Come softly, says. A beat, a pause. Realizes the topography is looping. Realizes. Obstruction, whole projection of angular prismatic plane of sloping interior, traverse the cranial depths. It is I, says. It is me, says. I miss you, says. I've stood waiting, says. The fjord has remained as it has. Unmoored, your vessel is now turned. A beat, a pause. I will. Yes, now walk, I will. Atone the oblique angles of unholiness and cover the windows of offshoot corridors. Think we are tired, and the night has been long, and we begin towards the inlet, where we have once stood, and we become you, become they, become the silent exorcisms of oblique angles, from which pitch and revel and sleep loss and shadow ascension, and crawl from below until the hallways end to darkened closets with staggering arrangements of flowers that miss you, which are not we, though they are. Okay, awesome.